Well, good morning and welcome to God's Grace Today I would like to discuss Revelations 18. And after this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was made bright with his glory. And he called out with a mighty voice, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place for demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable beast. For all nations have drunk the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality, and the kings of the earth have committed immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have grown rich from the power of her luxurious living." And then I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, lest you take part in her sins, lest you share in her plagues. And her sins are heaped high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Pay her back as she herself has paid back others, and repay her double for her deeds. And mix a double portion for her in the cup she mixed. As she glorified herself and lived in luxury, so give her a like measure of torment and mourning, since in her heart she says, 'I sit as a queen, I am no widow, and mourning I shall never see.' For this reason, her plagues will come in a single day, death and mourning and famine, and she will be burned up with fire. For mighty is the Lord God who has judged her, and the kings of the earth who committed sexual immorality and lived in luxury with her will weep and wail over her when they see the smoke of her burning, and they will stand far off in fear of her torment and say, 'Alas, alas, you great city, you mighty city of Babylon, for in a single hour your judgment has come.' And the merchants of the earth weep and mourn for her, since no one buys their cargo anymore. Cargo of gold, silver, jewels, pearls, fine linen, purple cloth, silk, scarlet cloth, all kinds of scented wood, all kinds of articles of ivory, and all kinds of spices, cinnamon, incense, myrrh, frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour, wheat, cattle, and sheep, horses and chariots and slaves, that is, human souls. The fruit for which your soul longed has gone from you, and all your delicacies and your splendors are lost to you, never to be found again. And the merchants of these wares who gained wealth from her will stand far off in fear of her torment, weeping and mourning aloud. Alas, alas, for the great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, with jewels, and with pearls. For in a single hour all this wealth has been laid waste. And all shipmasters and seafaring men, sailors and all whose trade is on the sea, stood far off. And they cried out as they saw the smoke of her burning, 'What city was like the great city?' And they threw dust on their heads as they wept and mourned, crying out, 'Alas, alas, for the great city, where all who had ships at sea grew rich by her wealth. For in one single hour she has been laid waste. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you saints and apostles and prophets, for God has given judgment for you against her.' And then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, 'So will Babylon, the great city, be thrown down with violence and will be found no more. And the sound of harpists and musicians, flute players, trumpeters will be heard in you no more. And a craftsman of any craft will be found in you no more. And the sound of the mill will be heard in you no more. And the light of the lamp will shine in you no more. And the voice of the bridegroom and bride will be heard in you no more. For your merchants were the great ones of the earth, and all nations were deceived by your sorcery. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and all who have been slain on earth.'" Well, that's a pretty powerful situation, right? So what does this all mean? Well, in chapter 17, Babylon is used as a reference to either a religious or a spiritual corruption. This religious Babylon was tolerated and manipulated by the leaders of the world for a time, but then it was destroyed. Revelation 17 tells us that in John's vision, the leaders of the world seem unfazed by the destruction of this spiritual Babylon. This fall most likely was complete by midpoint of the tribulation. And when the Antichrist and the false prophet fully engage in blasphemy and idolatry. Revelation 13 tells us. And in chapter 18, John's vision shifts to describe the fall of a slightly different Babylon. But in this context, Babylon is a political and an economic entity. And it's probably also a literal city. Perhaps not with the exact name during the end times. But it's common for a capital city to stand in as a reference to a culture or a government or even a religion. So Babylon in this particular chapter occupies a place somewhere in that range of meanings. And the fall that's described here most likely occurs near the end of the tribulation, probably as a result of the horrific bowl judgments that was described in chapter 16. An angel that proclaims the destruction of Babylon specifically makes mention her persuasive wickedness. In other scriptures, sexual immorality seems to have a double meaning here. So the Bible often uses sexual sin as a metaphor for idolatry and other forms of false religion. The city-nation of Babylon in these end times is not only a hub of commerce and power, but of sin and sensuality as well. In Revelation 18:1-3 stated, John hears another voice warning my people to flee the city. Well, this parallels with the Old Testament warning that was given to Lot to evacuate Sodom in advance of God's judgment. And then in Genesis 19, verses 12-13, not only does God want his people to avoid being caught up in the sins of Babylon, he warns them that tangible judgment is coming and they need to flee. So the sins of Babylon are enormous, and her judgment from God will be in proportion to that sin. The rapid nature of the judgment is mentioned here, and then it's noted in later verses. Revelation 18, verses 4-8, in the prior chapter, religious Babylon was said to have fallen, but there was no notable mourning from the leaders of the world. However, the fall of Babylon as an economy is met with grief. And the world leaders will see probably both literally and figuratively the smoke of her destruction. And then they stay away far in hopes of avoiding that same fate. But once again, the fact that this destruction was swift is a key point of John's vision. Revelations 18, 9-10. Along with the political leaders, the economic leaders will grieve for the fall of Babylon. Now, this particular passage lists many of the most precious commodities of ancient world. The point is not to give a literal inventory of Babylon, but to symbolize her far-reaching and her enormous wealth. So at some point in the end times, Babylon will go from being outrageously wealthy and powerful to desolate, faster than anyone would have thought possible. Revelations 18:11-20 tells us John also sees an angel throwing a great millstone into the sea. Well, millstones in that era were made of tough rock such as basalt. A common millstone might be, 18 inches around and about 4 inches thick, weighing upwards to 100 pounds. But what's described here in this chapter is a great millstone. That means it's a significant size. And millstones back in the day were so large they had to be worked by livestock. So you can weigh these things in thousands of pounds. But just imaging that massive boulder being dropped into an ocean, okay? So it has to be fairly huge to cover the entire planet. So that kind of parallels the complete and the speedy destruction of Babylon. And then when she falls, her activities will end. Just like that. And that avenges the persecution and the murder of God's people. Revelation 18:21 through 24. So in chapter 17 and 18, the consequences of that tribulation seem to have happened and are parallel to the various seals, trumpets, and the bowl judgments. Chapter 19 resumes describing a timeline, including the end of the tribulation and the earthly return of Jesus Christ. So I hope that kind of helps us out. You know, there's one thing I've been thinking about all this time, and I'll probably bring it in another video because I really have been thinking about it. I want to meditate on it, and I want to consult with Father on the actual meaning of it. And that in particular is the mark of the beast. Now everybody is still thinking, well, what is the mark of the beast? Is it the 666? Is it going to be something that's going to be stamped on our forehead, or is it going to be placed into our head? Or are we going to have a chip in our hand? Are we going to just have a, let's say, a brand? You know, the cattle got brand, and they can easily do that with us as well. But will it be an actual chip? And then why are we thinking about it now when it was presented way back in biblical times? Because that same prophecy was mentioned back in the early days. So if it applied to them back in their day, what is that symbol? Because it was already available then. Is it a belief? Or is it something that's actual and physical? We don't know. But that one is one thing that's got me tripped. And like I say, until I can find some answers to that, I'm always going to question that. Because the mark of the beast isn't something that's coming in our time today. It's something that was already available back in biblical times. And that's what's got me thrown off. So it's got to have already been here since back then. Can you understand where I'm going with this? So that's another chapter and another time that I'll be bringing that to you. So I'm going to make this short. I see that I've got 2 videos out there that have no views as yet, so maybe I'm going too fast. So with that, I'm just going to leave it here with chapter 18. And in the meantime, I want to continue to meditate and research and try to figure out what is this mark of the beast. Because it was told back in the day. Now, if it wasn't going to apply to the people back in biblical times, why was it even mentioned? Okay, so that's what's got me. I'm going to be chasing some rabbits to find my answer. And hopefully, Father will deliver to me. And if it's not meant to be, nobody will know until who knows. But that's what I see. And that's what I'm questioning. Okay, folks, so share your smile and hug those that you love, because life is short. Do something really good for somebody that you don't even know, because we all need a hand up. And we're loving, caring people. That's who God's children are. Loving, caring. And we're far from the evils of this world. And that's a grateful thing to acknowledge. Okay, folks. Love you. See you. Bye.